once civil society starts articulating its interests and the government understands that it's going to be a threat, then negotiations will happen between different groups. And when I say negotiations, this must be negotiations using professional mediators. It's not a question of sending, religious fathers or elders to do the negotiation. But these negotiations must be structured in a way that civil society and the state would have a working relationship on how to transform the regime into a more acceptable, plural organization than it's now. Otherwise, it becomes so violent eventually that it becomes the fight between an elite leader that she can bring her own ethnic groups or her own interested groups and try to hold on to power at any cost. And you've seen what happened to Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. There was this big issue between President Gbagbo and President Ouattara. Now, Gbagbo officially was removed from power by foreign powers. Then he was taken to the International Criminal Court. After almost a decade, the International Criminal Court has said he's free. He's free to go. Now he's back in Cote d'Ivoire. But how did we get into this in the first place? Where did you go? Where did the African wisdom of negotiating through elders, negotiating through mediators, where did it go? How did we arrive at a level where elite groups can literally destroy the lives of hundreds of thousands of people? The livelihood of millions is destroyed before any one of them can win. Of course, nobody wins in a war. What you have is what you call a pirate victory, where eventually what you've left after a war is a destroyed economy and a social fabric that has been torn apart. And therefore, it's very important to work on civil society. I think the media has a very strong role in this. The investigative media can investigate stories in different parts of Africa and make it available to its own citizens. This would help citizens to have any inkling of a democratic election would bring down governments, like it has done in Zambia. I think this is a great victory for Zambians because the government has been corrupt, everybody was fed up with it. And finally, the people chose the opposition. The opposition guy has been trying almost 4 or 5 times. He didn't have a leeway to go in, but now finally he got away. And in fact, I heard him talking to the United Nations General Assembly now. So this is the kind of lesson and process we have to go through. We cannot do it overnight, but through massive education on the media, through civil society organization, and of course, the role of organized institutions like religious institutions will have a lot of leeway in this, but they have to stick to human security, not their religious agenda. Because I have seen in Africa where I think the famous saying by Desmond Tutu is, when the colonials came, they gave us the Bible, they told us to close our eyes to pray. And when we opened our eyes, we had the Bible, they had the land, So it's
Our eyes are still closed even today.
so it's going to be a long process, and frankly, we can talk about this in another session because there are research protocols that are designed for this that will help governments to undertake such a process.
All right, thank you very much. We are moving towards the end of it, so it will soon be over. Okay. Before we get to the conclusion, I remember we made mention of the ethnic group being used as a divisive means to divide the people and rule over them. Of course, this is a strategy that were even used by the colonialists and up to date. Okay, I understand. Even before in pre-colonial Africa, there have also been some conflict among this ethnic group because we are people, we are human beings. Sometimes we make peace, sometimes we make war. But okay, we are still living, we are still here. Now, is it not possible that we can find a common ground So that instead of always looking at the elected official, the corrupt elected official, that from our cultural background, from our ethnic line, we can find a common ground to dialogue, to work together. Because we have been here for a long time, like I always say. Our life did not start with the republic that we have, with the Nigeria, for example, in 1960. We have been here for a number of years, for thousands of years. Can't we find a common ground to defend our common interests as a people?
Well, that's the problem, For one, I don't think illiteracy would define it, because every African community has survived, of course, through the millennia without the support of anyone. As a matter of fact, what slave traders and colonial powers have done is to destroy the crop of young Africans who would have transformed this continent. But the point now is, with the modern emergence of political systems, especially after the Second World War, where the borders of countries have been delimited, where countries have achieved what you call regime recognition by the international community, specifically by the United Nations. What has been done is we've left our African rural population illiterate, in quote unquote. Illiterate in a sense that it doesn't mean that they don't have knowledge, but they lack the particular knowledge in terms of how government is elected, how government is instituted, and what government is supposed to do. And therefore, that's what I go back again into the role of civil society, into the role of the media, into the role of young startups and entrepreneurs who can educate people, through either contact awareness, where people see what they're doing, or through educational awareness, where people have to be part and parcel of a certain training session or go through an experience to be able to appreciate this. And therefore, as I mentioned, the issue of Ghana and Zambia, where there have been lots of achievements in their democracy projects. Of course, there are habits that die hard and you don't know what's really happening in communities where state power has not been regulated to a point where you have the definition of the three coordinates of power between the parliament, the judiciary, and the executive, the role of the armed forces. Anything can happen. Mali has been a beacon of democracy for some time after 1991, because we can see what kind of military coups have been taking place in Mali. And therefore, it's important to look into this and see how we can push this forward. Guinea, for example, after Sekou Touré and all kinds of coups and counter coups, there was a very good effort by the population, by the elites, and by the international community to bring in the government that has been overturned right now. But President Conde wanted to continue a third term against the constitution by undertaking a referendum. And of course, it's very easy to say we have a referendum. It's only the government that's counting, and therefore it's very difficult to see, even if the people want a third term for a person who is that old and probably who has to retire and share his experience with the population. Therefore, it's important that civil society has to be strong enough. Much of what has been done so far in Africa, the kind of transformation we see from single-party dictatorships into even choosing different people within the same party, has been done by civil society groups and organized forces. The military, the church have been very active in Africa, the universities, civil society organizations that have been working under the table, literally, because they're not allowed formally. And exactly, what most African governments are doing is to shut down non-governmental organizations because they think they are a threat in trying to educate the public and become part and parcel of the opposition. So the only way to do is to continue using social media like you're doing now. With your podcast, for example, you're going to reach many people, and these people will reach other people. And now it takes probably a split of a second to share a video from one person to another person, or you can put it in Telegram where 200,000 people will see it at the same time. So these are the issues that are important. I think the role of the media in Africa has been really diminished. And we don't have good continental media organizations to be able to promote media rights. And media itself, in many cases, has shown that it's part and parcel of the problem and not the solution. If we see the Rwanda genocide, it was the radio that had been used to decimate 800,000 to 1 million people. But definitely there are better sides for the media. These are unique cases, small cases, where we see the media has been part and parcel of tyrants. But the media can be a source of education, because in the media, you're not just delivering crude education, you're delivering entertainment, you're delivering stories, you're delivering people who are making transformation on a daily basis. So these are the things that we need to look into very aggressively in this continent. And I think the African academia has a responsibility to undertake this. Much of what we've been doing is to go and run away to international organizations, or to be able to go and work in the West, initially as asylum seekers. And then, of course, you get the passport of that country where you got the asylum. And then you become a diaspora, where you can contribute a lot in terms of sending remittances, but also you can contribute a lot by educating the public in Africa. In some cases, we see the diaspora becomes counterproductive in supporting the processes that are going on in Africa, which leads to immense conflicts. And therefore, you need, a continental movement, much like what the African leaders did to liberate Africa. I'm sitting in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia, in my country, where the Organization of African Unity has been founded. These people had vision. They wanted one Africa. People like Nkrumah wanted one currency, one African nation, one African legal regime to take out Africans out of the complete misery of slavery, colonialism, and poverty. But we don't have many leaders of that kind of vision today in Africa. And those leaders, all of them have been ousted for not following their own vision that they set in the documents of the Organization of African Unity. And therefore, we need to pressure this. And the media has a huge role to play by undertaking investigations and providing the African population with investigative media. This is how the Arab Spring flourished. Eventually, of course, with the support of outsiders, the Arab Spring has been 10 years now. And you can say that the Arab Spring has changed now into an Arab winter. But definitely we have not removed the tyrants from that. So, but it's an exercise in governmentality. It is this process, the young people will say no. What we see in Tunisia today is a unique situation where the president has suspended parliament and the institutions of government. And he's saying they're all corrupt. So there are some who support those who have been suspended, and there are some who support the president himself. It's this kind of probably non-violent negotiations that take place between these older people that will bring the young people to think of alternatives on what they can do.